if there's alpha, and this is what I want to do with Not Boring and spreading it over both the kind of newsletter side and the media side and the investing side. But I think probably a lot of the alpha is in helping people who are like really technically good at understanding different areas, explain those things, like, and have people who really deeply understand the science or the technical side of something, but also how that feeds into the business model side of things. Like, I think deeper stuff and more technical stuff are like two things that I've realized, and like it's not common advice when you're starting a newsletter like this, but I think people appreciate deeper and more technical than people expect that they do, particularly in this industry. So I'd focus it on that, like try to probably like team up some like really good technical people who have signs of being good writers with incredible kind of editorial staff and like even people, making videos and whatever else. I think that's like one kind of interesting angle where it's just you have people who are like deeply embedded, deeply get this stuff and can explain it to a wider audience.
Welcome to Media Empires, where we sit down with the most influential media creators right now to learn exactly how they built their empires. Our aim is to extract the secrets of top-tier podcasters, newsletter authors, and media creators who are breaking the old rules for media success. Whether you're looking to start your own empire or simply curious about the nuts and bolts behind media businesses, you'll find valuable insights and tactics in each episode. Grab your headphones, let's dive in. Riverside is a presenting sponsor of Media Empires. It's an essential part of our tech stack. Riverside makes scaling a media business possible for us and so many podcasters and creators. It's our online recording studio, not just for the show, but across the entire podcast network. Riverside lets us record interviews with the best guests from wherever they are in the world. Our team can also cut short-form clips directly from Riverside, because as any listener of this show knows, you create once and then publish everywhere. Sign up for Riverside.fm today by following the link in the description box and use our code MEDIAEMPIRES to get a 20% discount. Packy McCormick famously started his newsletter, Not Boring, while he was unemployed with a kid on the way. Now, Not Boring is the #1 business newsletter on Substack, with over 200,000 subscribers, on top of which Packy has built a venture arm with Not Boring Capital. For many, Packy is the epitome of the single creator-led institution. In this conversation, we touch on how he evolved this content format, why a venture fund is the business he wanted to build, and his upcoming plans for experimentation. We also spend a great deal of the episode analyzing the opportunities in media for successful content businesses that don't currently exist, but should. Think of this as a request for startups in the media space. We recorded this earlier this year, but it's still very relevant today. Without further ado, here's Packy. Packy, welcome to Media Empires. Thanks so much for joining.
Great to be here.
So Packy, we here at Media Empires, we talk about the business of media and excited to go into the not boring business. You have this great episode at Acquired that really details the history of how you got to where you've gotten today. For those who haven't listened, why don't we just give a brief evolution of how Not Boring started and some of the major evolutions along the way.
Yeah, for sure. So I started my career in finance, moved over to a startup called Breather, where I worked for 6 years. The last year that I was there, we brought in a new management team. It was kind of the stereotypical bringing a new management team to a startup and things get less exciting. And so decided to start writing and take David Perel's Rite of Passage course kind of on the side. And so, luckily Breather had all these small spaces that were perfect for working throughout the city. So I'd like go get in a breather at 6 a.m. before work and write, or do it on the weekend, and really enjoyed the writing process. Didn't think it was going to be something that I did full time, but at that point, I think I tried to quit my job 3 times over the course of that year. And so it's like maybe if I just write a bunch on the internet, somebody who has a cool job will find me and we'll go from there. I was thinking about starting my own thing, physical space based. Joined On Deck, which is where we first met, and then pandemic hit. So anything kind of physical space based wasn't going to happen. It was a godsend. It was like a terrible idea. I would be miserable running that business today. So I got really lucky, but as part of figuring out what I wanted to do next, I asked my wife if I could just write a newsletter for 3 months. I changed the name to Not Boring, which was kind of the name of the other idea, and just started writing kind of full essays that were a mix of kind of pop culture and business and tech. And really kind of almost from the beginning of starting to do that, I was getting enough little signals, like the friends that I thought would be shitting on it were reaching out to say, I actually really like last week's post, or like, this is actually really good. And the kind of subscriber count just kept growing. And so once the 3 months were up, I was still making no money. We had moved into Push's parents' basements because our lease had expired. It was COVID and we were pregnant. And so I wanted to get the extra support there. And so I locked myself in the basement and just kind of kept writing. I think it took probably 9 months to turn monetization off. And I think probably one of the early decisions that ended up being important was that I originally thought, maybe if I can get to 5,000 subscribers, I can turn on subscriptions. Maybe 10% of them do it. 500 people at $10 a month, like I'm making $60,000 a year. Like maybe I can afford rent, and then hopefully it keeps kind of growing from there. Decided instead to turn on just sponsorships on the newsletter. And I think that's kind of been a huge unlock. There's different paths. Lenny Rachiski is killing it on the subscription front because he has, one, a great newsletter and podcast that feeds into it, but then two, like a very clear buyer for that. I was just kind of pulling stuff out of my ass every week. So I was like, you know what? Sponsors probably work a little bit better here than like asking somebody to get their corporate card and buy something called Not Boring. And really, from then it's just kind of grown and grown and grown fairly consistently, which has been really, really nice. I haven't focused a ton on the growth side of things, like really spend most of my time just making sure that I'm writing stuff that I find interesting and hoping that other people do too. Part of it is launched a venture fund on the side. So that's been a lot of fun, and, launched on the side that has become kind of a core piece of what we're doing now. And I think the two fit really well together, which we can talk about. I get the question a bunch, which is like, you're monetizing the newsletter now through venture? And like, I just don't view it that way at all. Like if I make no money on venture, I can't say that because like I want to perform well, but like I really just love doing it and love the combination of these two things together. I want to kick ass and have a top decile fund and all of that, but like really doing it because I think these fit really, really well together. So that's kind of the current state of Not Boring, is writing every week. I brought a couple people onto the team who are also great writers who write occasionally for us and help on the investment side, and then run Not Boring Capital.
Yeah, fascinating overview. There's so much I want to get into. First, just on the venture side, before you started Not Boring, it's unclear, like that was only 3 years ago, or only a few years ago. And it's unclear if you could have raised a meaningful size fund, or...
It is not unclear. It is very clear that I could not have raised a fund.
Yeah, I'm being nice.
Yeah.
Thank you, bro. Or gotten like a, senior GP job at some firm. And now those doors, I'm sure, have been knocking, and you joined as an advisor, I believe, at some point at A16Z. And so, I'm curious, do you see your story as something that other people can emulate, like the Packy McCormick for healthcare, the Packy McCormick for XYZ? Like, is that a way to break into venture? Is to kind of prove that you're an expert in a category and build an audience around that? Like, what do you think about that path to getting to venture?
Yeah, I think as with any path, like the first couple of times somebody tries to do it are the easiest. And so like, I'm sure there are much, much, much better writers on the things that I write about out there than me right now. But, I just have a little bit of, that momentum and switching costs built in. But certainly, like, I think that, Elliot on my team is a phenomenal example of this. He is doing, not boring. He's doing century of biology, talking about and writing about biotech. He's getting his PhD at Stanford right now. He has been kind of like in a few kind of venture programs and working with us at Not Boring Capital. And I think just has a really great sense for both kind of the science. And then also I think a lot of scientists can get stuck in like maybe the present a little bit, like a really good ability to kind of project out where things might be heading and form theses around that. So he's proof positive that you can certainly at least break into something like Not Boring Capital. But I think, he'll be raising over time very big and successful biotech funds. And so certainly I think there's an opportunity there. What I would suggest is maybe not being as generalist as I am on it, and like really finding that area where you can become an expert and be technically good and a good writer. And I think there'll be opportunities there, but I'm sure someone will come out and do a general version of what I do better.
Yeah. I'm curious if you've explored kind of like going much bigger with the media business in terms of hiring a number. You already, you've hired some writers in part-time capacity, and is special, Rahul also doing moonshots with you. So you're definitely expanding, but the temptation when something is working is to do lots of other things, right? And so other adjacent things, like you could cover all fundraise, like you could replace TechCrunch, or what if TechCrunch started in 2023, and maybe you already have to some degree. But I'm curious of like, what have you chosen not to do that seems appealing, or either not to do period or not to do now?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's period, but anything can change. I think the TechCrunch one is a really interesting example because there's like a lot of really smart, talented people over there who actually I think are really good at covering their sectors. But because of the volume of TechCrunch announcements, they still drive a lot of clicks and a lot of interest. So like they might perform better on the click side than I do, but like just because of the volume, it's less of a special thing than a not boring write up on a company. And so I think one of the pieces that I wrote, kind of reflecting on the journey so far and where it's going, was like no one necessarily wants more content. There's so much content on the internet. I want to get really good at doing the thing that I'm really good at, and not try to expand too much beyond that. Like if you had told me in the beginning of Not Boring that I could be making like $100,000 a year doing Not Boring, and that like occasionally I'd be able to angel invest in something, I would have been psyched and thought that that's like better than it would have turned out. And so I'd much rather focus on kind of doubling down on the core stuff here than trying to expand and kind of dilute the whole thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious on your thoughts on kind of the fundraise, announcement as a media more broadly. Like just to zoom out, Product Hunt kind of took the launch announcement and said, hey, instead of a TechCrunch journalist writing about it, we're going to democratize it and let you or me post of our friends launch announcement, and then kind of create some good discussion and commentary around it, and that you were able to build a pretty well trafficked site off that. And I'm curious if fundraise announcement is a similar opportunity where it's something that people always promote. There's sometimes interesting commentary around it, maybe why the investors invested in this kind of thing, who's involved. And so there's a natural kind of like growth loop there that I don't think outside of like tech, traditional journalism has been has capitalized. And so I wonder if there's an opportunity to do what Product Hunt did for the launch announcement for fundraise announcements. What's your reaction to that idea or framework?
Yeah, the dynamics actually do strike me as similar. I would say actually though that I think that like fundraise announcements are one of the most overhyped things relative to their value. Like I have a lot of people obviously at this point reaching out about fundraise announcements and portfolio companies wanting me to write up the fundraise. And like I think it's the least possible interesting thing about a company, and not just saying that as like a VC, but like I really want to write about companies kind of either when they've had some like huge scientific rate. We wrote about Atomic AI and we did it around their fundraise, but they're building, AlphaFold for RNA and like just doing this like crazy stuff that was featured on the cover of Science magazine. And so we could write like a kind of big meaty piece around the fundraise. Often want to just like kind of lean in and write about something when it's like hitting its inflection point. Like maybe that corresponds to the fundraise, but a fundraise announcement itself, it feels like one of those things that, like each one of the products on Product Hunt, and there's a lot of similarity and a lot of AI stuff now, but like is a new product experience and like something for people to try. Whereas I think it could get really vanilla looking at fundraise announcement after fundraise announcement after fundraise announcement. So I think the dynamics maybe on the supply side and the sharing might be similar, but on the demand side, like I can't imagine that people are just going to be reading that stuff all the time. I could be totally wrong there, but that would be my initial gut there.
And so it has to have some strong editorial. It can't just be printing a press release. It has to be like some actual analysis. And so you do it for the top, 0.1% or 1%. And I wonder if there's something for the top 10% that's not a full-fledged, Packy write-up, but that is also not a press release.
Yes. And, I've definitely done write-ups on stuff that I'd say is like maybe not top 1%, particularly kind of early on. And I think the interest in those is just lower, right? Like people want big, bold visions and like these unbelievably talented teams going after really big things. And so like certainly you could write about the 99% of companies that fall below that, but I don't think the content is as compelling. I had this post that I wrote on startup prophecies, and it's a riff off this idea of prophecy markets that Jacob Horn at Zora wrote. And the idea there is like a more kind of decentralized version, a little bit of what you're talking about, where like anybody can mint content around the companies that they're most excited about. And so like, let's say you see everything going on at Replit, you see kids creating, they just launched bounties, they have Ghostwriter. Amjad is doing a great job out on Twitter, just promoting the shit out of the company and going extra techy and all that. Like, if you're excited about that early on, like create art around that. Make a prediction that you think it'll be $100 billion company, and that like somehow, even though Microsoft's playing everything great, like it's going to actually, compete with Microsoft on kind of the IDE and coding side of things, and like put those things out there, put work into the content, and like maybe an ecosystem can kind of form around those predictions. I think all that stuff anchors to like the top, to your point, 0.1%, and even among those, like the 1% of the 0.1% that is actually important if it works and not just valuable. But I think there's like really interesting things that you can do there kind of permissionlessly once if people kind of anchor all the creativity going in NFTs and whatever else, and even just regular Substacks into kind of these top startups.
Totally. Let's go into your venture model. You're finishing out your Fund 3. Talk about how the style of investing has changed, and how you've really and why you've changed it. What you learned about the market or the opportunity or fundraising that has led you to land on a much more concentrated model.
Yeah. So funds 1 and 2 both had about 100 portfolio companies in them. I'd say fund 1 in particular was really like, I wasn't sure that I wanted to do it for a long time. I was honest with investors about that and with LPs about that, but had been doing a bunch of SPVs, and that was too much of a pain in the butt for founders. And so wanted to just have a vehicle to invest out of, and super broad, bunch of different categories, a bunch of different stages, go as late as Series E or as early as a pre-seed. And really the idea was there's this horizontal advantage that I have with the newsletter and the ability to, 1, get in front of founders, and then 2, be able to invest in the companies that we want to invest in, and then 3, help tell their stories. I think I saw a tweet the other day that was something like, a lot of emerging manager first funds are like just like kind of angel investing, but with a venture fund behind it. And I think that's very much what Fund 1 was. Fund 2 was as big, although I think I got better at picking and had a bigger universe of companies to pick from. And so we will see. I did a lot of Web3 investing there. And so like now that I'm talking to LPs, they're like, how do you feel about those crypto investments? And I actually, like, my contrarian opinion on myself is I actually love the crypto portfolio that we built there. And I think there's going to be a lot of really big winners out of that. So I think Fund 2 is going to perform well. And I think, frankly, it might even be easier to fundraise on a similar, but like maybe slightly skinny down strategy, because it's pretty easy to say to investors, look, I have access. I can get into a bunch of different deals. My check size is increasing. So like, instead of 100, I'll do 75 companies this time. But you're really betting on an index of the best companies and my ability to get into those. What's harder, in the way that we've decided to go, is to say we're doing like 30 core checks, and we're not doing SaaS, we're not doing consumer social, like we're doing Web3 and crypto, hard startups, atoms type stuff on the other side, like stuff that historically you probably shouldn't have invested in an awful lot of cases. And we're focused on kind of tech, bio, climate, and defense. And the whole thing sounds like buzzword bingo a little bit, but the thing that everything has in common is no playbook has been written. They're complex stories and big ambitions that I think we can add the most value by helping to tell those stories and explain what these companies are doing. And then 3, like a big one for us is defensibility on the other side. So like doing something really, really hard, but if they figure it out, the market on the other side is huge and the opportunity to defend the business is huge, and really looking for kind of $10 billion outcomes on the other side of that. Why we chose 30, frankly, is really just, 1, I think, I can build a top quartile fund with a bigger portfolio and just getting into the really good stuff, but I'm competitive and kind of want to go top decile here. And then 2, I want to be able to write and do podcasts and like kind of just throw everything behind every company that we invest in, instead of kind of the way that it works now, which is, when the time is right for certain companies, I'm able to write, but there aren't 100 days in the year to write a piece. They would all be crap if I wrote one every 3 days. And so really want to put the full weight of not boring behind each of the companies that we invest in now.
And how have you chosen in terms of ownership targets and check side stage?
Yeah, so we're doing call it $500 to $1 million checks in pre-seed through Series A. We'll do a few kind of explore checks, kind of more the pre-seed, and otherwise we're kind of looking at seed and Series A. Ownership targets, like if we can get 1% to 5%, great. I think, and I'm going to, I'm still talking to LPs, so hopefully they don't listen to this, but like, I do think that portfolio construction is one of the most overhyped things in venture. Like I'm like picturing the midwit curve where it's like invest as much as you can in the best companies. No, you need ownership targets and whatever. Invest as much as you can in the best companies. And then obviously like do everything you can to help them as much as you possibly can and be able to invest in follow-on rounds and all of that. But I think a lot of people try to just like sound buttoned up by overthinking portfolio construction when like, if the greatest companies in the world will let me invest $2 million, I break my $1 million cap and go for it. So that's kind of how I think about that side of the world.
Yeah. Even with the best portfolio construction, if you don't have the good companies, it doesn't mean shit. And
exactly.
Talk about how your content has evolved in terms of the different formats that you've experimented with and how you've kind of found what makes most sense there.
Yeah. So started out like super general, where, be writing mostly kind of about trends or things kind of going on. I, in the beginning, explicitly tried to do like one pop culture reference, one company or idea reference and tie the two together. So like creative destruction and the Mickey Mouse Club. And like the idea being that if everybody who was in the Mickey Mouse Club was still in the Mickey Mouse Club, like that would be really, really sad. And instead, like Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears, whoever, like went on to have their own great careers, like right at the beginning of the pandemic when everything was falling apart and people thought it was terrible that everyone was losing their jobs. Did a little bit more like kind of like public company analysis, like in a more fun way and all of that. Realized that like I don't have an edge in a lot of places, but I like particularly don't have edge in the public markets. And so like while I liked writing those and while nobody in the beginning was trading on anything that I wrote, like the audience got to a big enough size where if I wrote about something, even if I was like, here's the bear case and like here, like people would buy that thing in a lot of cases. And so, decided to stop doing public company stuff quite as much. I have really kind of two main formats for the newsletter now. One, general pieces of content that could be on a company, that could be on a trend, it could be on a weird idea like Startup Prophecies that I had, and then these sponsored deep dives that we write on companies, which the first time I wrote one, I thought I was going to get killed for. And I was like, this is probably the only time I'm going to be able to do this. And then people actually like them. I think founders like those more than the general audience. They're like, they won't do as well typically views wise as like the very best of our regular kind of Monday posts. But getting to go behind the scenes and kind of getting more information on a lot of these startups that we do think are kind of top 0.1%, I think is really valuable to other people trying to build companies, and the audience has liked it. And so we continue to do those, although those will probably be, as we write, just kind of more about portfolio companies, less and less of what we do. And then last year we added the weekly dose of optimism. I wrote this piece on optimism and how there's just not enough of it in the world, and how there's all this amazing stuff going on. But then like, Twitter today is just like all the world is ending and like just like all this bad stuff. And I'm like, what is going on? Like there's fusion happening and like we're curing diseases and T cells are fighting cancer and like all this stuff is happening and like we're choosing to focus on this bullshit. And so every week, and my brother kind of helps put that one together now. But every week we just put out 5 articles about the awesome shit that humans are doing. That's another one that we like, we put out a Sprig survey and we're like, people actually like this. Like, open rates definitely aren't as high as the essays. It's not like what we're known for. But the feedback was like, I think 86% love or something like that. And then the amount of kind of one-on-one messages I get, or like when I'm talking to founders, as much as my normal essays now, people are saying they like the weekly dose of optimism. And I think there's just like something about in that like last year, this awful 2022, just kind of like sticking with the optimism piece when like you listen to our friends at All In or something, and it's like, shit, yeah, we were responsible. Like this market sucks. Like we would never have done all the irresponsible bullshit that everybody else did, but like this is awful. And you guys like, we're going to be dumb and optimistic kind of no matter what happens here, unless the facts on the ground like really, really, really change. And I think founders have appreciated and readers have appreciated kind of that consistency there. I mean, I definitely get dunked on for the optimism as well, but I think overall that's been a really nice addition.
Totally.
Are there any content formats that you want to explore, experiment with upcoming, or do you think you're solid and it will remain over the next year looking similar, but just continue to get better?
Yeah, I think anything that I want to do would going forward would be experimental. So we've talked about the idea of like a debate podcast, and I think in line with kind of the weekly dose of optimism, like there's just a lot of like yelling past each other going on these important topics. And like I was in a debate club, did debate in high school and college, started a debate club when we first met when I was at an on deck as part of my idea, and not a business, but like I think a really interesting format and a really good way to kind of like just see the kind of facts on both sides and get really smart people to kind of curate down to like the best 5 arguments on each side of an issue. So if I find some more time, maybe a debate podcast. And the other one that I mentioned in the Startup Prophecies piece, I would love to do more. And like, I'd be terrible at this, but optimistic short story sci-fi. I think like, in particular, even about the companies that we invest in, like these people are doing wild shit. And I think like just imagining what the world looks like in 50 years, if somehow they're able to pull it off, I think it'd be kind of fun. I don't exactly know how that would work because like so many of them are solving like very particular things. Like I don't know exactly how you write that story, but I have the idea in my head to like write it from the perspective of my kids when they're like 28 and like their adventures in this world where all this cool stuff has happened and just kind of been implemented and just like, hedonic adaptation. Everyone finds it normal now, but like the world is just really good. So those would be like the 2 formats that I'd experiment with, but the plate is full right now. So we'll see how much I get to.
This idea is, I like those ideas a lot. This one I'm about to say is way too much work, but it'd be cool if there was like a museum called like 2050 or something where you go in and it just mimics like how life is, just a few decades from now.
Totally. Have you seen the World's Fair Co?
No, I haven't seen it.
And what Cam was he's trying to pull off? It's really cool. He's trying to build the World's Fair again. And a lot of it is that he's making good progress on it. Yeah, I think we need more of that. I think that'd be amazing. I think the other one that like is probably missing is, and hopefully someone can just build this in like full haptic VR or like get inside your brain. But like the world right now, if the things that have been invented hadn't been invented, right? Like there's just like so like people really like to glorify, the 1900s and living in the countryside. And like, great, your food is like all rotten now, and like you have to go kill your cow to get more of it, and like all this like stuff that I think it's just really easy to take for granted. I think it'd be fun to do the like counterfactual VR experience.
Totally. And similarly, people are like, I hate my phone, I hate social media. It's like, okay, well, let's imagine a world without your phone.
Yeah.
It's like, what's that like?
Totally.
That's really interesting. On the S1 idea, or just kind of if you weren't kind of moving markets, so to speak, or influencing people to buy, is it something you still explore, or is it kind of irrelevant to your business that is the venture business? Because I'm curious, just in general, if there's an opportunity to build like almost like a rap genius for S1s, or just kind of like, I know Mario's experimenting with S1 Club. If there's some content business that can be built around better, like, user generated public analysis.
Yeah, I think there probably is. I think I'm probably the wrong guy for it because I do tend to be too optimistic on things, particularly for the public markets. I think that's like a feature probably in early stage venture and a bug in public markets investing. So like literally anything that I would have put in single name stocks before, I'm just putting in different symphonies and Composer, which is one of our portfolio companies. And like somehow, since I started investing in Composer in March of 2022, my portfolio is up like 20%, which is not how the markets went last year and not how the stuff that I still have in Robinhood did. So I'm better off just kind of indexing. I think probably a lot of people are as well. But I don't know. Like, I think good explanations of what companies do and like what the key levers are and all of that without any kind of like prediction about what might happen in the future. I think that can definitely be made more approachable. But like, I don't know, I've like come to like more and more think the public markets are just like the funniest thing in the whole entire world. And like that there's this huge industry of people who take themselves very, very, very seriously and like show up at work every day in ties to, maybe traders aren't wearing ties and hedge fund, but like take it really fucking seriously to like maybe outperform the benchmark if they're one of the really good ones, and like maybe do it consistently. I think it's one of those things that we'll look back on in like 100 years when we're all just like creating art because AGI and we're like, do you remember when people like pretended that this was like a very serious thing that you could do? So yeah, that's kind of my view on public markets right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting that some people are trying to, like Sakura is trying to create that kind of analysis for private markets, and our friends at Contrary are trying to do that with their research.
They're doing a great job, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's interesting to see, people kind of follow your work and try to do it for just a longer tail of, or in a slightly different way.
Yeah, and I've been, Sakura I've been a fan of for a while, and then I've been really impressed with both kind of the company selection and the quality of the work that the folks over at Contrary have done. So yeah, I think the more of that, the better.
Yeah, I've wondered if there's a way to compete with Crunchbase or PitchBook, both of which seem to do okay, but aren't like beloved products. Not to speak badly about them, but if there's a way to kind of compete, especially Crunchbase is a bit kind of stingy with data and kind of like a give to get model. Is that a space that you've explored at all?
No, I think there's just so much data cleaning and checking and verification. Like it is not an area that I'd be any good at. I would love. I had the free like friend of PitchBook access until I guess midnight on December 31st this year, and they cut it off. And so now I'm like desperately wanting my PitchBook back, but probably not willing to pay $27,000 a year. And so I'm like bumming PitchBook runs off of friends right now. It'd be awesome if that information were more easily available for less money. And I'm sure just the way the world is moving, it will be, but I have no desire to build that. I'll be a consumer of that information for sure.
Makes sense. I want to do a thought experiment with you. Let's say that you were not pursuing the venture capital route. So you cannot invest into companies, but you were still enterprising and wanted to build, as big of a business as possible. Where would you take not boring if you were if in another universe you couldn't do venture?
Oh man, I've written this before, but I've probably said it before. But like, if I told my wife before I ever started even thinking about writing that when I retired, I wanted to like read, talk to smart people, and invest. Like that's what I would have wanted to do. So like the fact that it's ended up here already, it's hard to think of something else that I would have done. But like on the newsletter side, I think there's a ton of opportunity there. Like I could grow Not Boring into a much bigger business on the media side if I weren't like conflicted out of sponsored deep dives because I've invested in competitor companies and like all of that kind of stuff. Like there's just a lot more that I could do on that side of the business. I'd probably also just like build and experiment a little more. Like I'm not a technical person, but I would just like kind of build more with the team, probably more kind of products and experiences around Not Boring. So like maybe that, like startup prophecies idea, like try to build something there, or, I think having a mini kind of like product studio attached to this and just spinning up little things, I think could be good. I don't know if that leads to a big business at all. I think it'd be really fun, but in the media business can at least support, it's a high margin, very low overhead kind of business. So it can support a bunch of those kinds of experiments.
Yeah, totally. Let's brainstorm a bit. If we look at the last like 7 years of tech media, like it feels like the things that are most interesting have been you, have been Lenny, have been Harry, Mario. So some great podcasts and newsletters that have really become institutions. I don't mean to downplay it when I say that, but we haven't seen like a new TechCrunch, or we haven't seen like new tech media companies that are beyond individuals. Now you've expanded beyond yourself, but you get what I'm trying to say. And what I've wondered is like, if TechCrunch existed, if someone tried to start a new TechCrunch today, would they start with one kind of vertical, like a Packy or Lenny, and then try to add more on top? Or like, I almost wonder if there's an opportunity to build like a holdco where you, and this I guess is what Workweek is trying to do to some degree, where you try to just discover the next Packy, the next Harry, the next Lenny. And what I wonder is like, how much alpha is there? Like, let's say someone discovered you at Breather, someone discovered Lenny at Airbnb. Would you have partnered with someone in like a joint venture type way? And if so, like, how does the business capture value? I guess, do they become, get some percentage of your management company? Like, you sign 360. Like, I'm curious of your perspective on the prompt of like, if you wanted to build a tech media company today, if you were ambitious, you're trying to build, whatever TechCrunch achieved, but native to 2023, how would you go about it? And then I'm also curious what you think of the holdco for individuals idea.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an investor in Workweek. I almost didn't because I thought it was like kind of competitive with not boring, but I'm really glad I did this. I mean, Adam is awesome and they're doing a great job and growing really fast. And I think executing that model, just like a media operator only could, and certainly not something that I'd be able to do. I think if there's alpha, and this is what I want to do with Not Boring and spreading it over both the kind of newsletter side and the media side and the investing side, but I think probably a lot of the alpha is in helping people who are like really technically good, kind of at understanding different areas, explain those things. Like if you could clone Elliot, 100 times, or, Raul is like a little more spread over a few different deep tech categories, but I think that works as well. Like if you could clone that and have people who really deeply understand the science or the technical side of something, but also how that feeds into the business model side of things, like I think deeper stuff and more technical stuff are like two things that I've realized, and like it's not common advice when you're starting a newsletter like this, but I think people appreciate deeper and more technical than people expect that they do, particularly in this industry. So I'd probably focus it on that, like not trying to find a Packy because I'm not good at that. I'd try to probably like team up some like really good technical people who have signs of being good writers with incredible kind of editorial staff and like even people, making videos and whatever else, although we haven't done as much on that side of things. But I think that's what I want to do with Not Boring. And I think that's like one kind of interesting angle where it's just you have people who are like deeply embedded, deeply get this stuff and can explain it to a wider audience.
Totally. I like that a lot. I also like the genre of the debate as you were mentioning, because it feels like really great analysis is rare, and really great analysis from both perspectives is even more rare. And so being able to take whatever is the big issue within tech of the week and help people not just understand it, but also understand kind of like the various trade-offs, and is a real opportunity. How, just to play it out for a second, like how do you, like, let's say this existed and you were pursuing it, like how would you choose topics almost, or like what kinds of what examples come to mind of things that would be really helpful to unpack both sides of?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably look at things where where there are just two sides of people deeply entrenched in their own view, and so like the last thing the world needs is another conversation about Elon and Twitter. But like, I think that's kind of an interesting one where like, there's just one side who thinks it's like the worst thing in the world and he's evil and the company's going to fall apart. There's the other side who thinks that like he can do absolutely no wrong. And like, there is an answer that is certainly somewhere in the middle of those two things. I don't know exactly how you'd like what the topic would be that you'd be debating within that to make it like totally fair, but something like that. Obviously, there's the Web3 debate, which I found myself in the middle of. I do think tech, and one of the reasons I haven't done it yet, like I do think tech is a little bit hard to debate about because, like an anti-crypto person like wins a crypto debate just by default right now. But I also think that like the next decade is going to be really, really exciting. There's just going to be like new things that any debater that you choose like wouldn't really be able to see. Like, there's clips of me or like, Mark Andreessen, our friend, like getting, not being able to like describe the future of those things. And like, of course, like that's the people who are going to be building over the next kind of decade who are going to be doing those things. So I do think it's actually easier in most of these debates for the cynics to win and the bears to win, which is one of the tricky features of it. Like AGI, like who fucking knows, right? Like, it's just like there's too much in there and too much that's like, left to be discovered and figured out, that you get the two smartest people on either side of that. And like, neither's really going to know. And they're probably like both equally right. And we'll see how it plays out. So I think that's the biggest challenge with the idea, or like Google versus Microsoft. It's like, yeah, Microsoft is doing better in AI and Google's like kind of a lazy company. So like some of them are just like obvious, it's just, I think it'd be really hard. And that's why it was a good question to like find the exact right things to debate.
Totally. Yeah. It's Yeah, it goes, what was the quote of like, cynics look smart, optimists make money.
Yeah.
So yeah, I might be on the wrong side of that. That's really interesting. I mean, what do you think about the holdco for? So let's say you find Elliots for different categories. How do you, like? First off, do you envision that it should be a unified publication? Because Workweek is actually doing the opposite, right? Or they're building around these creators, whereas you're doing a unified thing. How do you think about the trade-offs there, and what this media company of the future could be?
I think the Workweek approach my gut would be that the Workweek approach makes more sense if you're starting from scratch. I think the not boring approach can make sense if you've like built something up over a few years and then can say like, look, we're just about all this future stuff. And like, sometimes I try to pull something in these areas out of my ass, but like, actually this person's going to be like way better at explaining this. I'm personally really excited about it. I'll contribute to it, but like, it's really useful to have that person. Whereas I think Workweek starting from scratch just comes with the belief that like, some people really want to learn about franchising and some people really, really want to learn about fintech. And so if you find those people, give them back office support, give them the opportunity to like build other things kind of on top of the original media property. My gut is that works. Whereas if you said like, we are a new publication that does space, AI, biotech, and, crypto, like, I think it's really hard to find that initial audience for something like that would be my gut.
That makes sense. And then it's interesting, like if you were just finishing Breather, would you have taken a Workweek offer, or do you prize independence so much?
I came close to even like a few months into writing Not Boring full time, taking an offer at one of the big newsletters. And obviously, like hindsight's 2020. Glad I didn't do that. Although think the world of those folks, but yeah, I think I would have done that coming out of Breather. Someone would come to me and said, like, you're lost right now. You're leaving this company after 6 years. We can give you a bunch of different opportunities. We see something in you, kid. And like, we think you're a great writer and you'd be really good at explaining this. I also don't know though, like finding me out of Breather, like what you'd fit me into. Would I be like the real estate tech writer? It's like, I think there is probably some value in just like having people explore and build a little bit on their own. I think probably the better spot to do would be like, instead of right after I came out of Breather, if I were starting Not Boring now, I think definitely, unless I wanted to do like a bunch of Twitter threads and whatever, but like definitely struggle to find an audience more than I did then. I think it's somehow discovering those like diamonds in the rough who've been doing this thing, who are really, really good, but like just can't get distribution, and then being like, hey, you're awesome, but like it's impossible to get distribution right now. There's a million newsletters, like come join our thing. I think is probably the best time to do that.
And I've been curious about like financing for creators in general, because in venture, it's so easy to be aligned where you discover someone early, they're pursuing a company, you invest in it, that company gets big, investors along for the whole way, and also takes more risk, of course. Whereas for a creator, whether it's a tech creator, a newsletter writer, podcaster, YouTuber, you could discover someone, but you're not guaranteed to keep them, right? They'll get big, and as they get bigger, that deal might stop, be making less and less sense, which is why I think you have to find someone who's on the come up. Like anyone who's got an audience is not going to really, take give a big percentage of their thing. And then even though they're on the come up, you have to be providing much more value, such that like an investor can invest equity and then chill. You want to add some value, but like you're still going to get yours. Whereas you invest in creators, you kind of have to earn it the whole way.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think again, Adam has thought a lot more about this than I have. But again, where I like the Workweek model, like I think what creators don't necessarily, like the good ones, don't need is cash, because like it's just not an expensive thing to do. And so like I think that like I know there are people who are trying to invest in creators, and I think in some cases that can make sense. And if you find the right rocket ship, like I hope that there's some sort of model there. But like whenever I've been reached out to for something like that, my thought is like, what would I even do with that money? Because Substack is free. I don't even have subscriptions. I don't even pay them 10%. Like my main platform is free. It costs me sitting in a room and writing. Maybe I have somebody to make cool videos, but like, I don't know. I think it's really hard to get the creator like really excited about the money piece. What would get me excited is like the time piece and the like, we can expand what you're doing, but like keep it focused and kind of feeling like your brand. And I think like that's where Workweek coming in and being like, cool, we will throw events and we will like maybe launch products and and you just do the thing that you do best and like provide creative input here, and you show up to a studio and there will be a microphone there and you just like talk into it, like that kind of stuff. I think creators probably want time more than they want money. And so I think you do need to be pretty hands-on throughout.
Yeah, totally. I agree that the money is not just enough, or the money is often maybe to hire more people to save you some time. But if you can come in and offer a set of services, and that's why I also think that the people who are investing in creators also probably have to manage them in some, or like have a really close relationship in some capacity. I'm curious if you've explored other platforms like YouTube or other ways of other platforms in general.
Yeah, we do. I mean, like we have a founders podcast, which is probably like 5% of the audience size of the newsletter, with one of our portfolio founders, Anton at Chroma. We've been doing Anton Teaches Packy AI, where we just like kind of throw the camera on, he explains the paper to me, we throw the paper up. And so like YouTube is marginally helpful there. I think our best video has gotten 5,000 or 6,000 views, which is not bad coming from a cold start, but like most of them don't. And then we've started doing our founders podcast, just like throwing them up on YouTube. But like to say that that's us doing anything on YouTube is like a disservice to the millions of people who actually put effort into creating content on YouTube. So like, yeah, probably at some point I'd like to do a little bit more of that. Like I just, if I'm going to be making the content and finding things that I think are really interesting and like forming theses on them, like to be able to reach more people in formats that kind of work for different people would be great. Not everybody wants to read 10,000 word essays every week, and I completely get that. But really the main investment has been in kind of the newsletter.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like if we're having the same conversation, 3 years from now, and we're kind of reflecting on what's exciting in kind of tech media or tech analysis, do you think it's going to be somewhat similar today in terms of like the dominant perhaps formats are newsletter, Twitter, podcast, and instead of 5 really compelling people, there's maybe like 20 or something? Like I would call that maybe incremental, or like what do you expect to change, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, a pitch that I'm sure you've seen a lot of, and I've seen a lot of, is like the curator thing, where it's like there is all this good content, but like nobody knows how to find them, and for whatever reason, like they never work. And so maybe somebody figures out the curation piece, like where instead of Googling what's a transformer model, like what's a transformer architecture, like you find like the Substack writer who's like the very best at transformers, and like who also understands you and speaks your language, and like it's just the best way for you to learn. So like definitely a discovery piece of it. Like I do think it'll be more a la carte over time. Like the relationship piece I think is important, but I also think that consumption like should and will be more a la carte. Like I love finding things from people who I've never heard of in my life, but explain something in a way that I wouldn't have thought, or that particularly resonates with me. So I think discovery will have to get better in that way. So my view that it would go like the other way. That there's probably not like 20 main people, but there's I hope a few main people still, and then like a long tail. And certainly like one of the things that I want to be able to do is highlight the people who are doing the things that I'm interested in the best. But I probably would have thought that it would have changed more over the past 3 years than it has, and it's still very much like write a newsletter, put it on Substack. People will add different things on the side of it, but like the Substack is the main thing. And so, it'll probably end up looking something similar to that, but hopefully with a little bit better discovery.
Totally. I'm curious if you find people going back and reading your old posts with some frequency. And then a related question is there a book in Not Boring's future?
I don't have an aggregation theory. There's not a book in Not Boring's future. Somebody on Twitter the other day said that they're going to compile a bunch of essays into like a
I saw that. Yeah.
So I guess that will happen, but I don't know what I would write about, and I don't know what I don't know what anybody would read 100,000 words from me on, or like what I would feel confident writing 100,000 words on. So probably not. Never say never on any of this stuff. But yeah, people do go back and read the old stuff all the time. Substack just added a feature, like not anything crazy, but like a notification feature where they'll tell you any activity. And I'm surprised how often the activity is someone liking or even commenting on like a very old post. So definitely people do go back and read those. I think probably Great Online Game is a piece that I wrote that like it's reread the most, and then I see on Twitter the most. But like random stuff that I've written, I'll get notifications that people are in there commenting or reading.
Yeah, it is interesting. There's a class of businesses that we've discovered in the past few years. Could be good businesses, but probably not venture scale businesses. And often it's content businesses, or it's commerce businesses, or it's communities, kind of like the social, to give it full circle, like the social club that you were exploring with Not Boring. Although now that you have an audience, that would do much
Probably
better.
a little better.
Yeah, and those, and it's interesting. I mean, the future of social, in some sense, it seems that people just want more fragmented, and so it'll be interesting to see, like, are there financing opportunities for these kinds of businesses, even though they're non-venture scale? One version of it is to maybe invest at much with like revenue upside. So maybe there's some version of that, or if you just invest at like much lower valuations, maybe something that sells for it's not going to sell for $30 million. If you got in at like $500K or so, that's pretty 60x or whatever. And so it'll be interesting to see how we get more of these kind of like boutique or lifestyle, but whatever you want to call it, real businesses that just are not venture scale off the ground.
And my another heretical view on this, like, I think software is probably heading that way at some point in the next X number of years as well, where like there's going to be so many unbelievably cool products that people can use, but like there are going to be many venture scale pure software businesses started like 10 years from now, or probably not. And so I think figuring out this model will have a lot of upside and opportunity. I think crypto is a really good one here, frankly, but we'll see. And
just maybe in closing, flesh that out a bit more. It's a good one because like users, you mean like users get an upside in the products that they use, or
yeah, they don't need to return a fund, but they can, they obviously a bunch needs to be worked out. It needs to like be much clearer which things are just complete scams and which things aren't. I know people are working on that, but like, yeah, this idea of, hey, here's a small product that I want to use. I'm happy to go support this thing, like almost somewhere between patronage and investment. I think as products get more and more and more niche, like that funding model just makes a hell of a lot more sense. And so you're not hoping that like the market cap of this thing goes to $10 billion, because it shouldn't, but like maybe it becomes worth something to a small group of people, and then your tokens are worth something, and you've gotten the product that you want, and you can be part of the community, and you're like token gated as an early supporter of that thing and get different experiences. So it just makes sense. There's a lot of things where like I can't even write the essay on like how all the pieces I think will fit together in the future, but like I think AI is good for crypto, and like there's just a bunch of these things that I think will come together, and we'll look back in a year and be like, remember when everybody thought this was like a total scam, and when I get dumped on all the time for being a fan of it? And I think this is like just a very good example where you have to like guess that the internet might move that way, but then like this is just a much better funding mechanism.
Totally. And I I love Blake Robbins' idea of a full-time fan. The idea that, hey, let's say I'm the third, subscriber to Not Boring, or the third listener to the Founders Podcast, and that thing goes on to get, Not Boring gets hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Like, not only do I want the social credit for discovering early, but it'd be cool to have some financial upside in it, along in exchange for referring it, and similarly, if you're, we're both building subscriber bases, like we want passionate, rabid fans who are going to be sharing the content, referring it, doing work for it. And so there needs to be tools to enable it, because there's so much value being left on the table.
And there will be, right? Like that's the other, and this is why the debates are so hard, because like seeing exactly like what those tools are and like how you do it in a way that's not scammy, and how you like keep bots out of it, like all of that is actually really, really hard. But like in 10 years from now, will that something like that exist? Like almost definitely.
Yeah, totally. I think it's a good place to wrap. Packy, this is a great overview of the business you've built to date, and some broader thoughts on the future of media. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Riverside is a presenting sponsor of Media Empires. It's an essential part of our tech stack. Riverside makes scaling a media business possible for us and so many podcasters and creators. It's our online recording studio, not just for the show, but across the entire podcast network. Riverside lets us record interviews with the best guests from wherever they are in the world. Our team can also cut short-form clips directly from Riverside, because as any listener of this show knows, you create once and then publish everywhere. Sign up for Riverside.fm today by following the link in the description box and use our code Media Empires to get a 20% discount.